And we're back, everyone, with another installment of AFF-CNY's pre-conference interview series. I am Shemin Vizzi. The next workshop presenter will be discussing neurofeedback. For those of you who don't know anything about neurofeedback, let's check out this interview and see if we can get a little idea of what they're going to be presenting. Welcome, everyone, to our next pre-conference interview. And I have co-presenters, or actually more here. Susan's a facilitator, and then we're going to have some co-presenters next week at our conference. So let's start off with Matt. Why don't you introduce yourself to the community and kind of give us a little idea of how you're connected to adoption or foster care?
Sure, thank you. So first, I'm Matt Fleischman. I'm a psychologist. Largely, much of my career, child psychologist. I've stopped seeing clients about 2 years ago and been working in a project to get neurofeedback, which is a non-invasive treatment, out into larger utilization in all sorts of communities. One of the things about neurofeedback is it's a process to train the brain to better self-regulate. And we just know that children who go through the adoption process often have a lot of trauma early in their life, a lot of disruption, a lot of things that affect development. And that neurofeedback has been a highly effective tool in really helping these children recover some of the adversity that they received early on. And so it's such a useful tool that the Neurofeedback Advocacy Project is really reaching out to get this into hands of more clinicians and therefore into the parents and children who would benefit from it.
Okay. Susan, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Susan Grunberg. I am an implementation consultant here in Brooklyn with a long history of child welfare advocacy and work in New York. So when I connected with Matt, I knew I needed to work with him to help him get neurofeedback to the New York community, to child welfare. And as a parent myself, through foster care, I wish this is something that had been available to my family. So I am really just working with Matt and his team to try to get providers in New York to implement it and to expose this as a potential opportunity to the caregivers and professionals that will be at the conference.
Okay, so Matt, I see a little bit in your bio, you were introduced to neurofeedback, it says in 1989. So you have been a psychologist for a while. How did you get introduced to it, and why did you feel like, oh, I am totally going for this one? This is something I'm really interested in. How did that happen?
Well, first, I have other modalities, but it was really clear that in a lot of cases, just talk therapy, family therapy, I'm trained in all that, I have books on that. There was something about the client that you could just see there's a neurological piece going on. We've been trying to address that with medications, but medications have not been as effective. And when I saw this tool, and you would start to see kids who were angry and explosive, suddenly they just handle things better. I didn't have to manage it better. I'm good on behavior management, but this wasn't behavior management. The child was easier, the child was happier, the child was sleeping better. I knew that there was another way that we had to intervene. But the thing about this is neurofeedback isn't a subduing process. We're not trying to calm people down the way medications do. What you started to see is the child, everybody has good days and bad days, but you started to see the good days became more the norm and longer. And when a child was upset, the degree of upset was much less. And suddenly everybody is just getting along and functioning a lot better. So a lot of the parenting, the family therapy, and all those tools are still real helpful, but they were so much easier to use that I made this a regular thing, and have helped, convey it to other people who come back and get the exact same results. So that's why people don't believe this is possible until they see it, but it really is possible to intervene in some other sphere besides simply talk therapy, family therapy, or medication. So
Yeah, so this is more, correct me if I'm saying this wrong. So it's a regulation type tool.
Yes, to regulate that the brain has this ability to it's a healing ability within the brain. And I don't mean this in some woo-woo sense. It's that we can actually now, by giving the brain back certain information, and that's all we do, the brain goes, oh, I see what I'm doing here. It would be like, the feedback I was thinking, like learning to ride a skateboard. Now, I'm not getting on any skateboards now, but when you learn to ride a skateboard, you get feedback from your balance systems in your body. And that's how you learn to ride a skateboard. And the brain has this own feedback mechanisms. I don't want to get too technical, but it turns out they're not too complicated. If we show the brain what its activity is like, and we do this actually by embedding it in video games or watching a YouTube video, or the picture shrinks or expands, simple things like that, but it's very sophisticated. But when we show the brain, oh, wait, you're really going out of where you don't want to be, just by shrinking the screen, the brain goes, oh, okay, well, let me try not to do that. And that's what happens. There's no conscious effort. We can work with little kids. We can work with adults. There's no age point to which we can't do it, because the brain always has the ability to learn if it gets the feedback or information.
Susan, you mentioned right before this that there are other people joining you. What will they be bringing to the conference next week? What kind of perspective are they going to be bringing?
Great question. So we have at least one clinician and one parent to share their experience. Both, obviously, the parent is a kinship caregiver, and she has a child who has all the things Matt talked about, really extreme trauma, and she's going to share what the experience of neurofeedback has been like and how it has changed their lives. Like everything the coalition does and any kind of new modality, the last thing we want to do is just be a bunch of people who come in and tell everyone to do it. We're trying to start a movement here, and it really has to come from the voices of people who are living it, who are living the trauma, who are healing from the trauma and can share their stories, and as well as from the clinicians who can say, this is a really cool thing I'm doing, and more people should do it.
Matt, how did you get connected with Susan? So that way, how did that happen?
Okay, sure. No, I was just real fortunate because Susan's been fabulous. Can't say enough how great she's been. We've been promoting the project now for a couple of years, and Susan, being in the field she's in, keeps her eyes open, I think, for what's out there and what's promising and exciting. I think when we started, because it's not easy to access in some parts, she'd heard about it, but this project, and we talked for a long time, and she joined the project. So that's how this started.
Before I ask my last question, is there anything that you would like to state? My last question, I'll just let you know, is how will this benefit everyone in the community, not just parents, not just professionals? How would this benefit anyone? And if you want to add anything else before we end the interview, Matt.
I would say we need to do much better in the whole field of mental health and child welfare. And I'm not being critical of what exists, but we need to go to the next level. And I would not be pushing this project if I and everybody else that we work with, I mean, we're over in 20 sites now, and not one of them has taken this on and said, nah, this doesn't work, I don't want to do it. Everybody who's gotten involved said, how do we take it bigger? This really is such a promising thing that so few people know about. And the people who know about it, often when they go out to look, have to pay for it and a fee for service. And that's our other piece, is I'm not out there to promote this to people who can just go out and pay for it. It's good they get it. But, people who adopt children, they often, money is tight, insurance is limiting. We want to get this out so that it's as accessible as any other intervention without having to pay afford or pay humongous amounts. It has to be available. I think if we can get those barriers overcome and get more providers, it'll just take off on its own, because every place we go, the people who receive it, I'm talking about the families, the children, the whatever, they start telling other people, you should go get this too. And so we kind of have to reach a tipping point, if you will. And reaching out to you and your audience, we're hoping that this will help us reach that tipping point.
Susan, do you have any last minute things to add yourself?
Yeah, just to build on that, we want kids and families to not just survive like they are, even with the modalities we have. We want to see them thrive. We want to see them experience joy, and often that's not the case in the child welfare community, and we don't even hope for the best, and so we want people to get there, to know that maybe they can heal more this way. But like Matt said, and I mentioned, this is really a movement. And so the goal ultimately is to have neurofeedback available to anyone in the country who needs it. But it has to be accessible, and we have to use evidence to get there. And so we're looking for partners. We're looking for agency partners who will want to implement it, so that the families and who are part of the coalition can access it. And then we want to share that with the field, so that so that we can advocate for greater accessibility and to everyone.
I always say I have a last question, but here's another last question. During your workshop, will you be not showing, but telling more how it works, so that way the when you hear the word neurofeedback, you think different things. Are you going to clear up some of those things, and that's why one of the parents will be there to show what they've experienced in their past, Matt?
Right, both. One is we'll show some clips of what happens in a neurofeedback session, because you're right. The first concern is, oh, this is shock therapy. No, it's
sorry, I didn't
not.
want to say that. I don't think that's appropriate. Okay, all right, as long as you say.
That's okay. It's perfectly, because that's what everybody's thinking.
Yeah.
No, it's not. So we have videos, and also, I don't know exactly what the mother will actually say when she speaks, but she said that was her first concern too. Was it shock therapy? She had to look into it and get some trust before she would let anybody put electrodes on her kid's head. But no, it's the same thing as if you ever went to get an EEG. If you thought your child had seizures, you would get an EEG, electroencephalograph. So they paste these things on, but no, nothing is going in, and it's just reading the brain. It's like the stethoscope for the brain.
Amazing. Amazing. I appreciate this. This is very, very helpful. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. We don't have very much resources on Long Island, so I can say I agree. And then when we do have a resource, the amount that you have to pay for is extreme. Mm-hmm. So I totally understand why you're bringing this to the forefront for everybody. And I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me before the workshop next week.
My pleasure to meet you. Look forward to it. I really am.